Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another live edition of the Second Shift podcast. Mike Verkest, frantically fumbling with the controls to make this all work. So, I mean, just, you don't have to worry about me, but I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and then I got to do this, and then they'll all come on, and it's magic. And I muted everybody. Let's try this again. Hi.
Howdy.
Okay, can you hear us?
Yeah, we got you. It's all good. It wasn't as clumsy as I had it in my mind.
No, looked good. Looked good.
Yeah, no, it was good. It's good to see everybody. We got tons of people already with us, and that is a good thing.
I like it.
Yeah. It's a wonderful, what is it? Tuesday? Is today Tuesday?
It is.
It's funny. We were talking before the show started, Sam and I, and we're like, how's working from home going? Like, what's going on with that? And that is one of the downfalls, right? I don't know what time it is. I don't even know where I'm at half the time.
Yeah, I don't know what day it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. So, as you will notice, we've got our guests. Sam, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
We'll get to the good stuff here in a minute, and of course, Dr. Jarvis, it was a late addition to the podcast.
I see how it is. You only love me when Ritu just shafts you. See. He stood you up, and I'm your second date. I see how that is.
No, that's not true. Well, here's the thing.
That's a little true. Come on now.
Well, no, there was, we've been planning this one for a couple weeks now. And this guy here, since he can't be here with us, I'm going to throw him in here.
Two.
Yeah. What's up, buddy? So he's just going to sit here with us in spirit as we get going here with this amazing broadcast we're going to do. Because, by the way, it's going to be amazing. But he texted me yesterday and he's like, I forgot that I offered to cover a shift for a coworker, so I can't make it. I'm like, bro, we advertised, we've scheduled. Come on, man. I can't reschedule everyone. We're coming into the 4th of July. This is going to be weird. No. So anyway, there he is. What are you going to do?
All right. Ratu, my buddy.
Yeah. We got lots of people. Look who jumped in. Our man, Joe Z-Man.
Hey.
Live from the hot tub. That's so good. Well, we should probably introduce our guests. I mean, that's
we should.
I mean, if anyone's been paying attention to anything, who she is, what she's been up to, what's going on, why we got her on the podcast. But Sam, would you please introduce yourself? Let the people know all about you and what you do and what we're going to do today.
Sure. Sounds good. I like being able to see the chat on the side because I see a couple of my folks here supporting.
Absolutely.
That's nice to see. So I'm Samantha Johnson. I am one of the Senior Associate General Counsels for Grady Health System in Atlanta, Georgia, which is one of the largest public academic healthcare systems in the U.S. It's a 953 bed urban level 1 trauma center. And I have the pleasure of having worked there now. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary in May.
Nice.
And it's been a wonderful 10 years, looking forward to many more. And one of the things that I do at Grady is I spend a lot of time representing our EMS service.
Awesome.
It's so great. It's so great. So I get to advise them and defend them and work on all their contracts and sit on the QA committee and learn a little medicine here and there. Enough to be dangerous with it. I can usually find what protocol we need to talk about. And so it's been, it's a great experience.
Wow.
That works both ways. I've seen enough TV shows about the law that I could be really, really dangerous. I can halfway pronounce a couple of legal terms, and that gets me in trouble. So,
what's your go-to show there, Jeff? What's your go-to legal show?
Okay, so you clearly called me out. Law and Order. I guess that's the only thing I can remember right now.
Yeah, I mean,
classic.
Yeah.
Well, my all-time favorite show is West Wing, and there are a bunch of lawyers in that show, so that's really a lawyer show, right? Maybe. Sort of.
I've heard you talk about West Wing before. I know you're a big fan.
Love the West Wing.
But I also know you're a big fan of the Ozark show that just you started watching? I told you.
We did. So Sam, my wife and I binge watch shows to just avoid the harsh reality of our current world. So rather than jump off a bridge, we binge watch shows. We just finished Madam Secretary, loved it, and Mike here was suggesting one. He suggested the Ozarks. Yeah, interesting.
Is that something to add to the list then?
Mike definitely thinks so.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It is slightly, there's a naughty twinge to it. Okay, so it's definitely adults only. It's on Netflix. It's got Jason Bateman, he's won multiple awards for this show. He directs it, he acts in it, and it is just Mexican cartel, drugs, sex, alcohol, murder, just everything, and it's all in the quaint little area of Lake of the Ozarks. It's really good, and there's 3 seasons. I think we said it's good. If you haven't seen, if you've watched it, if you're in the comments, if you've watched Ozark, put a comment in there because it's a real deal.
So the thing that really set it for me, I think in the first or second episode, I'm sitting here watching it, and there is a scene where the lead character is a financial planner who does money laundering for this cartel. So he leaves Chicago, goes into the Ozarks, and is trying to set up new ways of laundering money. And so he goes into a strip club because, they're a largely cash-based business, and he figures he can launder a lot of money.
Funds through there easy, no problem.
And one of the dancers, some of the talent, is about 9 months pregnant up on the pole. And I went,
that's perfect.
What did you recommend for me?
It's perfect. Yes. Thank you, Nat. It was not really filmed there, but whatever. It's cool.
Future student doctor, Natalie.
Yes, future doctor. Everyone's telling me. So Cherokee County, Georgia. Stephanie says Ozark is amazing. You can't stop watching. I know. I'm trying to tell people, wait to the last episode.
So I did hear that they just signed a deal for season 4.
They did. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's done. So we need to go through and find out what people are having for a beverage. So we always do this on our lives. Jeff, why don't you start? What do you actually, Sam?
Our guest
on, and she's
I want to know what Jeff's drinking, but I have Chardonnay. This is Sonoma Cutrer. It's light, it's buttery, it's good stuff. Nice summer wine.
Very good.
Summer wine.
Jeff, what about you?
Well, this is, you can't see it, but this is my Barrow Brewing glass from Barrow Brewers in Salado, Texas.
All right.
I'm in the ER in the morning, so this is one of my Heineken non-alcoholic beers.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. And Joel's like, man, I got water. He's at work. Sorry, bro.
It's not any water. It's sparkling water, all right? The man's classing it up a little bit.
I'm telling you, I became a big fan of Pellegrino about 2 years ago, and I've always got to have some at the house. That was never my thing before, but I like it a lot.
Nice.
So I've got a little George T. Stagg. There's not much left. This was part of my birthday present that Mr. Eric Bauer sent me, out of nowhere. You should Google it if you don't know what it is, because I kind of knew, but I didn't know. George T. Stagg. Good. And I'll tell you,
it's a little hot.
I'll tell you, I was just going to say, this is what I did. I took some bottled water and I just put a couple of teaspoons of water, and I cannot tell you what a huge difference it made.
It opened up the bouquet.
I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Ed's got iced tea. So, he was feeling Joel's issues there. All right. So
I got a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Since, we have a lawyer here. I have a compliance officer whose office is right down the hall from me. At least it was before COVID hit. And Beth is always critiquing my emails. And she says, Jeff, and she starts talking to me about the spelling. So how many P's are in this thing? Where does the O fit? What is this stupid law? And what's the abbreviation? Help me out with this.
Before you answer that, I gotta get us there, bro.
Okay, all right.
He's jumping in.
Yeah, you jumped the gun just a little bit.
I'm trying to help out. I had that planned. I had rehearsed that, and now you just blew it.
I know. Well, we'll give you another chance, but I have to say something, and it says Mike Verkest and Dr. Sani on here, so you got to give me a sec to set this up, because I got to tell you, I have been looking forward to this podcast. Well, actually, we were sort of hinting around at it a little bit, like, oh, you should come on the podcast, whatever, for a couple of weeks, and then we finally pulled the trigger. But for 2 years, I've been wanting to do. There's 2 podcasts that I really want to do. HIPAA, bam. The other one is going to be something on AIDS and HIV, because I want to update. I want something new. Yeah. I want to find out what's going on, because you don't hear about AIDS anymore. So that's the other one I want to do. Plus, we need another celebrity of some kind. But anyway, so I am so excited that finally, after 2 years, we're doing the HIPAA episode. Okay, Jeff, go ahead. So your office is right next door to a gag, officer, right?
Yeah, but I already, dropped my gag out there, and now you walked all over it.
Come on, bro. I was feeding it to you.
Funny, and you walked all over it.
You're not going to.
How do you spell this law? This constantly confuses me. It's clearly HIPPA, right?
Actually, no. 1 P and 2 A's.
Where's the O?
So the O is a mistake, but lots of people put it in. I think it's an autocorrect thing, actually. I think most people end up with it. When you put the 2 P's in, it autocorrects you to hippo, which is, great for jokes, but not so great for your legal documents.
So you're saying it's Bill Gates' fault?
I'm saying it is. Yeah. Like everything else, when it changes the word that you meant to write to duck, and that was not the word you meant to write. So
truth.
That's good.
But yes, so it actually, it's an acronym for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And that's where those 2 A's come from in the end. But the spelling of it, like Beth has an issue with it. Our compliance officer, DeAndrea, has the same issue. It drives her bananas when people spell it wrong.
Yeah. Some people, they have a thing, right? And for some people, that's their thing.
Mine is trying to make glidescope into a 3-syllable word. Glidescope.
Is that how it's supposed to be pronounced?
No. It's
no. Okay.
2 syllables, glidescope.
Glidescope.
The scope
okay.
glides right in. Glidescope.
Okay.
That doesn't even seem like a thing, Dr. Jarvis. Like, how are you forcing that in there to be a thing?
Oh, trust me on this. Come on, Facebook. How many people call this a glide scope? Oh, y'all are going to leave me hanging. This is going to be horrible.
No one's going to admit to it.
I know.
They all do it, but they don't want to admit it.
Well, they've heard their partners do it. They would never do it, because we have a high-class, intelligent audience.
Oh, look, we got
they're stuck with. I feel obligated to fill Ritu's role here. See, Jordan gets it.
There you go.
All right, let's just jump into it. So, Sam, tell us a little bit about what is HIPAA? Why did it start? What's the story with HIPAA?
So HIPAA has a lot of parts to it. Not only that, it's had a lot of things added onto it over the years. But basically, it does a couple of things. It was meant to be a law that addressed whether you could move your insurance from one place to another.
So hold on a sec.
Oh,
so you're saying that's the P in HIPAA.
Portability. Yes.
Okay,
copy that. Move things from one place to another.
Check.
The accountability piece comes in both the privacy rule, which talks about how your protected health information can be disclosed and shared. Then there's the security rule that sets forth the requirements for securing the PHI, making sure that it's safe. And then you have what's called the High-Tech Act that added on certain requirements particularly for breach notifications. So as people shifted more to electronic medical records, to maintaining records in portable formats, those were things that obviously need more safeguards, because it's not like you could just lock up your office with all the charts in it. Your charts may come home with you on an iPad. So there have to be more protections for it. And, you see in the news about data breaches all the time, and hackers that, access things they're not supposed to. I'm sure you probably are having your credit monitored somewhere on account of having been involved in one of those. Most everybody has.
Yep.
So those notifications are a part of that HITECH Act. And basically the rule is about how you use the information and how you protect the information, because patients are supposed to, have privacy. You want to value your privacy of your medical information.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, obviously it is a great law, right? I mean, like there's no question that HIPAA used the way it's supposed to be used, right? And, or I should say the interpretation of that. And that we'll talk about how that varies widely, whether it's law enforcement or getting patient outcomes, things like that. It makes a ton of sense to have people's protected health information protected. Yeah.
Well, like most laws, there's usually a reason that the law was written. So talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, the difference between law and regulation and then interpretation.
So did you really want to put everyone to sleep? That's super
Hey,
part of all this.
Foundation. We're building the foundation.
Exactly. Right.
That's good, Dr. Jarvis. Thank you.
But basically, what HIPAA is, there's a basic framework. It was a law enacted by Congress. It's a federal law. It applies to the states, and it was put in as a framework. The laws generally are not terribly specific. That's where you get into the regulation part of it. So HHS, the Health and Human Services, does the regulations for HIPAA, and it tells us how to interpret various aspects of the law. And then, of course, you have case law. So as people litigate cases, you also have cases interpreting those regs, interpreting those statutes.
So practically speaking, so we've got the law, we've got the regulations that are meant to be a guide on how to enforce the law. And I've learned a lot of this from Dr. Sani and his advocacy talk. So I'm still learning it all, but primarily from the DEA side of things, as we had the patient access to medications law that we're still working on regulations, trying to get all that. But it's interesting that we have a law that everybody seems to know about, especially if you're working in EMS. We all know we got to give patient privacy. We got to give them the little sheet of paper when we transport them, the whole 9 yards. But as Nick so eloquently said, nobody understands really what it is, right? Or how to do it. So I guess I don't know. In my mind, I'm trying to think, why do you think it is so misunderstood?
I think because people don't realize that, particularly among healthcare providers, it's actually meant to assist in the flow of information between healthcare providers. What it's really meant to prevent is healthcare companies or, hospitals, providers selling your stuff to marketing companies so that you're going to suddenly start getting targeted ads on Facebook and, stuff like that. I mean, you've had those experiences where you've been browsing something on the web and then you log on to Facebook and there's an ad.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And it's kind of creepy. So imagine that you go to the hospital to be treated for, COVID, right? And you come home and all of a sudden your mailbox is full of marketing materials about COVID. Because it's
hydroxychloroquine ads.
Yes. Or face masks. People are sending you free face masks. Try it out. Some people might not object to that, and some people might. They don't want that information being shared. And particularly if you have sensitive diagnoses like HIV, substance abuse, You're seeing a psychotherapist.
Yeah, I was gonna say behavioral issues or whatever.
Yeah, you don't want that out in the world. So it's really meant to limit, how your personal health or protected health information can be sold, essentially. But among providers, it's meant to enhance the flow of information.
Well, that worked well.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah.
and it's literally done the opposite. I mean, I'm sure people will chime in here on the chat, but everyone's had the experience and continues to this day where it becomes the barrier to getting information on patients that we were involved in, and it's super frustrating.
Yes. So a lot of times people use it in a defensive way, I guess is the best way to put it, when it's not supposed to be used that way. And, we kind of talked about this before we started tonight, but people like to blame it when they don't want to actually go find that information and give it to you.
Right.
When it's difficult to look up, or, you're not entirely sure how much of something you're supposed to disclose. So you just say, I can't tell you that because HIPAA.
Yeah. And I mean, really that brings,
there are two things that I know as an ER doc. I can't give EMS outcome data because of HIPAA, and I can't drink coffee at my workstation because of JCO. Those are the two things that I know more than anything else. So they've got to be true, right? I mean, I'm always told that.
Yeah.
So the great answer for lawyers on everything is it depends. And the outcomes thing is very interesting because some hospitals are very good about sharing information, particularly if you have a hospital-based service. It's certainly easier to do, but there are ways to get around that. There are ways to ensure that you're still protecting the information and not giving it out inappropriately. So again, we don't want everyone to have all the information. You want the crews that took care of the patient to get the information about the outcome. So usually what I've seen is that it goes from the hospital to the medical director of the service. And then the medical director is responsible for making sure that it's communicated to the crews that were involved in the patient care and not necessarily communicated to everybody. Okay, so if a crew attended a cardiac arrest and, Mr. Smith survived, and it was because, they did high quality CPR, the crew needs to know that. The hospital can probably tell that to the medical director, who can then find that particular crew and give them that information.
So interesting there. You mentioned so Steve Smith brings in a cardiac arrest and we want to get information on how that patient turned out. What part of the chart? So we can get some information to him from the chart, but is there anything that specifies what part of the chart he can have access to? So like his childhood immunization records, the therapist he saw when he was 13 and the patient's now 84. Is it free game?
Yeah. So, and that's part of the reason we need to limit the amount of information that somebody can get access to in the chart. So everything in HIPAA is based on a minimum necessary standard. You can only produce the minimum necessary information to accomplish whatever your particular task is. So that means that you can't go through the whole chart and talk about, did he have all of his immunizations as a child? You can talk about what happened in his, post-arrest care. He came in, we saw him in the cardiac ICU. He was discharged after 2 days. He's doing great. And if there's a particular thing that's attributable to what the crew did, you called in the STEMI alert in a timely manner. You gave a great report over the radio. We really appreciated that coming in. That sort of information can be disclosed, but you have to have someone who can filter that and I see Nick's question about who decides that in the moment. So it doesn't really get decided in the moment. It's something that's going to have to be a little bit after the fact.
But I thought you were on call 24/7 for just that question.
Well, that's why you get to be friendly with your hospital lawyers. And so again, that's usually why I think the preference is to filter it through the service's medical director, because physician to physician, you can limit the kind of questions that you're asking to get the information that your crews need.
So one thing that's interesting about this, and I work with ESO and we have their HDE set up. So when we bring a patient in, we get a certain data set that's agreed upon and spelled out in our BAAs, Business Association Agreement or Associates Agreement. And that specifies what data will be sent, who will have access to it. But if we bring the patient into one emergency department and then they are transferred out, so crew A, Jane and Bob, bring the patient in, and then another crew, Mary and Jane, take the patient to another facility. That's 2 episodes of care. Now, that's at least the way our BAs are written. So the first crew wouldn't have access to the tertiary hospital outcome, and vice versa. Is that something that just happens to be negotiated through our BAAs, or is that actually part of that minimum necessary?
So you can get around that minimum necessary through those data sharing agreements. You can agree upon a certain amount of information that can be shared, and that can include, outcomes from another hospital. So hospitals, and actually providers generally, can always share information for treatment, payment, and operations. But it's not required. It's permissive. So that's some of the reason why one hospital might be more willing to share information than others, because it's not a must, it's a may. And if you're trying to protect the security of that information, you want to make sure you have all those safeguards and those data use agreements, those BAAs, those can spell that information out for you.
All righty.
So I've got a question, and that's popping up on the screen. So let's talk about it. So I will tell you that I've seen this in the past. It's been a while, but I have seen it. And let's say you have a busy main headquarters, right? And there's a lot of activities. Crews are coming and going. They're printing charts off, maybe, and this might sound foreign to other people, but print a chart off. They got to exchange, maybe get a new fentanyl, so they provide the chart to the supervisor or whatever. And face sheet gets left out on the table. Page 6 of a 10 of the PCR gets left out on the table, and there's just kind of crap everywhere. People are milling about, whatever. Like, are there real consequences to those kind of activities? Because I would be willing to bet that most people that are watching or listening, and I could be wrong, but nothing happens, right? And so nothing happens. Therefore, that sort of, I guess, positive reinforcement to a bad behavior just sort of perpetuates itself. And next thing you know, there's just crap laying around everywhere. So are there real consequences to having issues with HIPAA from like a crew standpoint?
So interestingly, it's traditionally not been enforced as much in EMS as it has been in hospitals. One of the things that you see a lot in hospitals is somebody getting the wrong discharge papers for a different patient. And then they go on the news and they talk about, Grady gave out my info to somebody else and they gave me something. It doesn't seem to happen as much with EMS, but interestingly, in Georgia, the very first HIPAA ambulance settlement just happened in December to the tune of $65,000.
Oh, hello.
Yeah. So there's some real money involved. There was an unencrypted laptop that was left on the bumper of a truck, and there were 500 or so patient information in that unencrypted laptop. It fell off and they got in trouble for it. But not only that, when HHS's Office of Civil Rights came in and did the investigation, what they apparently found was, that the station was full of random charts sitting around and fake sheets and all that. And they found that this service really had not done the training, had not done the compliance audits that they needed to do, had not been keeping the information secure. And that's how come a laptop got lost. So they ended up having to pay, $65,000. They're also under an agreement with OCR to be monitored for 2 years. And so I think there's going to be a renewed interest in enforcing these actions.
Yeah.
And if it gets really bad, the annual maximum penalty now is $1.7 million. So that's
no chump change.
That's not chump change. It's expensive. And if it's knowingly done, not just, negligently you left it around, but you're doing it purposely, that kind of stuff gets referred to the DOJ for criminal prosecution.
Wow.
And, like with accreditation, once you have a surveyor in looking at one thing, they never stop with that one thing.
Yeah.
They find all the other things that you've been doing. So you may open the door to things like False Claims Act or kickbacks or who knows. And you just want to be careful about that.
So I guess I have two questions about this. One, I was about to say, what the hell is it about bumpers and laptops that is where EMS tough books go to die?
They do.
And then I decided maybe I shouldn't say that because I personally left a tough book on I swear to God, you go to open the doors and take the patient out, and that's just a perfect place to rest a laptop. So from a system QI standpoint, it seems like maybe what you should do is put a little bracket in there so when you set the laptop there, it doesn't fall off and get run over.
Yep.
Or you could just encrypt your data. That might work better.
You could encrypt your data. I know that our tough books, our IT department can erase them remotely.
Yeah.
So, once you have it reported that it's stolen, they wipe it and they can't see any of the things. Now, the real problem comes when people are putting it on their personal phones or texting information or, the worst thing ever, taking pictures of stuff. And keeping it on their personal phones that cannot be wiped, that can be a problem.
So, where was it? Oh, so two questions. I want to come back to the pictures in a bit. So,
definitely,
Nick had a question here.
Yeah.
He said, "Are there fees? Are there fees or fines?" It's probably what he's saying about street level providers. So. Has there been any case law where a paramedic has been fined for a HIPAA violation? And is that just because we've been lucky? Is there a reason that you couldn't go after the street level provider?
I haven't seen it, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It's generally levied against the service because, let's be honest, paramedic paychecks are not where the money is. But I mean, it leads termination a lot of the times for the providers. So we have a zero tolerance policy at the hospital for it.
Yeah.
And, it basically just means you're fired. Like once we saw that you've done that, you're gone.
Yeah. So, I've been around one provider and it was early. God, it must've been around 2005 or so. It seems like, but, made just a vague, and we'll talk about social media here in a minute, but it was a super vague, seemingly vague at the time, right? But somebody that knew the patient saw that and boom, and he was gone.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and people do watch what your employees put on social media.
Oh yeah.
And they love to report it.
We can just talk about it now. So let's talk about social media.
And hold on one second.
Go ahead.
Since you jumped all over my joke earlier.
All right.
I do want to follow up on this, and this is a COVID thing, because I have heard, and typical doctor, I know nothing about the law, but there was some discussion about the use of FaceTime for video conferencing. So between me and my paramedics talking about medical information, or between me and patients.
So, oh, sorry, I interrupted you, Jeff. Go ahead.
Well, so initially my understanding is that is verboten because it's not encrypted, even though my understanding is FaceTime is encrypted end to end. But then I understood there was something about some COVID stuff where they have made some exceptions.
Yeah, there was an emergency rule or something in play, and Sam, you can probably talk about it better than me, but we did notice that here in our local area as well, because we were trying to figure out all angles when it comes to these COVID patients, and that was certainly a hot topic. And then all of a sudden, this sort of exception came out. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Sam?
So what OCR has done, rather than waiving the rule, okay, so HIPAA still applies in all aspects, even in COVID land. But what they've done is they've issued these notices of enforcement discretion. And that means we're going to choose not to enforce these rules if you do these things. And telehealth, of course, is the big one right now. And what OCR has said is we want you to, act in good faith. We want you to use approved applications that we know have encryptions, and to use the highest levels that you can. So you can talk to your medics on FaceTime. If they're calling you from a scene because they have a patient who's trying to refuse, you might want to actually look at that patient, and you can have the medic hold up the phone and you can talk to the patient right there on FaceTime. The only thing they've really said you can't use is TikTok. They don't want you use, that was specifically in there. I went to look, they don't want you using TikTok, because that's apparently very unsecure.
So interestingly, I think TikTok is, I just learned about this. TikTok is like a Chinese company that is essentially a tool of the Chinese state. So I think it's probably pretty safe that anything that goes on TikTok is just going straight to Beijing, and they're going to use it however they want to use it. So it's not something that's interesting that they specifically called TikTok out.
Mm-hmm. They did. And they said, don't use it. But things like Zoom, WebEx, that kind of stuff, they've said is okay to use. In fact, we have been using WebEx for our psychiatric commitment hearings. We have a secure site set up by our IT department. And so you're talking about, mental health patients where you have the judge involved and the attorneys and the doctors. And there's definitely, protected health information that's being disclosed as part of this court proceeding. But because we really can't do these hearings in person, WebEx is the next best way to do it.
So, Mike, do you mind because I'm very interested in that. This whole emergency detention thing this has nothing to do with HIPAA. Maybe a little bit. So in Texas, there is no 24-hour emergency authorization. As a physician, I cannot detain someone in the emergency department, even if they tell me I'm going to walk outside, get my gun from my truck and shoot myself. I can't stop them. We actually had a bill, and that's not a random example. That's a very specific case that happened to me as a resident. But we are not allowed to. We don't have a law that lets us stop them. We had a bill going, and the governor vetoed it last session, and it's coming up again. So one thing you mentioned there was these hearings. Is that while the patient is in the emergency department within 24 hours? When does that happen, and how does that happen?
It's actually, they've usually been with us for about 2 weeks by the time the hearing happens. Okay. It's for when you're trying to keep people longer. So you have in Georgia, you have what's called a 1013, which allows you to transport someone to an emergency receiving facility to be evaluated. You can keep them for up to 48 hours. Then you've got to give them what's called a 1014. You can hold them for 5 more days. And then you have what's called a 1021, where you actually do these hearings. And that's for people that you want to keep longer. So for up to 6 months. And so when we get to the time of these hearings, that's when we're using the WebEx. So
that's sort of interesting. The first one, what's the one that allows them to be transported?
It's called a 1013. That's the number that's on the form that Department of Behavioral Health uses.
So
So
does that apply to if a paramedic is in the field and they see someone that they have a reasonable suspicion that they're going to be a threat to themselves? Does it apply to them to get them to an emergency department?
no, unfortunately. And actually, because I see Nick on here, he tried to get some legislation passed that would have allowed paramedics to do that. They are not, but I can tell you the very first case I handled for EMS was a case of a lady acting nuts on the side of the highway. And I mean, I don't want to say they stuffed her in the bus and hauled her off to the hospital, but I mean, they kind of did. And it actually went all the way to a jury trial. And they found that, because she had been acting so nuts, they were authorized to restrain her and take her to the hospital where she got checked out. So, that was an interesting case. So they don't have the authority to do that. Physicians do.
Interesting. So maybe there's some truth to every so often just do what you think is right and hope you survive a jury.
Well, I mean, if your documentation is good and you did the right thing to try to help the patient, that's what's important. That I can work with that.
So do emergency physicians in Georgia have the ability to restrain someone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they have the authority to issue those 1013s. Any physician can do it.
So do you happen to, here's some pop trivia for you. Do you know what that code is in California that allows you to detain a patient?
I don't. I know in Florida there's the Baker Act, which is much more extensive than I think what anyone else has, as far as allowing people to be evaluated. And maybe that's because a lot of people in Florida are crazy, but I don't know the California one. Do you know about it?
Yeah, 5150.
Okay.
It was a good album too.
That's the reason I know about it. That's the name of a Van Halen album, and apparently that's where they got it from.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it was a trivia question. Well, I am so sorry for shanghaiing the question. I think you had, Mike, you were leading up to what's so wrong with putting a picture of my patient's crashed car on Facebook.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Well,
let's rap about this, because I got to tell you, of all the things we're talking about, this is why people get fired right here. What are they called?
Absolutely.
Social media assisted career suicide or something. There's like an acronym out there about this thing.
I believe, since it's second shift and we can cuss on second shift, I believe that's called being an asshole in a no asshole zone.
Yeah, it certainly could be. It certainly could be.
It's so I can't take credit for this. I read this on a HIPAA journal blog site, but basically when it comes to social media and PHI, it is actually, there's actually a blog site. But you're supposed to treat it like Fight Club. Okay. And the first rule of Fight Club is you never talk about Fight Club.
Right.
The rule is you never talk about it. So when it comes to social media and HIPAA, the first rule is never post PHI on your social media. And the second rule is never post PHI on your social media. Like, you just don't do it.
Right.
And so, what are the kind of things that get people in trouble? The selfie with your unconscious patient. That has been circulated. There was a nurse. I know that there was a case where a nurse in a nursing home went to jail for posting inappropriate pictures of the residents in the nursing home. If you walk into the emergency room and you're held on the wall because there's 1,000 people in front of you and you whip out your phone and you say, wow, I hate waiting in the CR, and like your whole picture is just patients in the CR, that's the kind of thing that can get you fired because you're not allowed to do it.
So here's an interesting thing, because the paramedic in that scenario is pissed off. I'm guessing that the patient is also going to be pissed off. So what happens if the patient says, man, this is bullshit, and they get their phone out and they go, CNN, are you watching? Look at this horrible condition. Does HIPAA apply to pissed off patients?
No, it's okay for them to do it. it's not okay for healthcare providers to do it. And I know that is very frustrating to people because they're like, well, why can my patient post a selfie with me, but I can't post the selfie with my patient?
That's not fair. My mom was fairly clear with me about these things.
And it's really because, patients can obviously disclose whatever about their lives that they want to. Most people put all kinds of things about their medical conditions on their social media, but once the healthcare provider does it, then it's a violation.
So right in there, sort of ish. There's a lot of weird blur, but Steve's got it, and I don't know if his whole
Good question.
His whole comment's not going to come up, but it says, I've had. Oh, why is it?
Oh, like I can see it in the chat. On the
I think these providers have taken pictures on their personal phone and try to upload it to their PCR. I try to explain to them that that's probably a bad idea. And is he right about that? Well, I'm going to delete it.
Well, the problem is you can never be entirely sure of what's been deleted off your phone. And so if you are using a work issued phone and your department allows you to do those things on the work issued phone, then it might be okay. But it's basically never okay to do it on your personal phone.
Yeah.
One other thing to remember is that, especially if it's a crime scene or something like that, suddenly you've made your phone into evidence and the cops can seize it. And we know that EMS
that ain't the only thing they're going to be looking at.
Right. I mean, they keep things on their phones that maybe you don't want everybody to see. Right. So, so you have to be very careful about that.
I was just going to say, Jordan brought up a point there about, so we use ESO at the location that I work, and it's kind of the same thing. If we take the picture within that application, and it basically goes directly in there, and then then it's encrypted, and it's never been on any device. It doesn't save it to the tablet that we use. So that's a little bit different, but and
it's end-to-end encryption. So it's encrypted. As it's taken, it's transmitted in gibberish that nobody can use, and then it's unencrypted. Actually, I think it just lives encrypted in the chart. And Jordan's talking about Epic. My hospital has cursed us with Epic also. And he's right. There is a pretty slick little feature where, let's say I'm seeing a rash or an infected surgical foot wounds are the ones that this happen all the time on. So you can take an image of it, and it goes into the chart, but you're taking the image through the Epic app to make sure that it's end-to-end encrypted.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Nick had a great question about this, where he was talking about the benefit of scene pictures and versus HIPAA.
So EMS folks are great storytellers. Can't you just come and describe the scene? Do you have to take pictures of it? And if you have to take a picture of the scene, try not to have the patient in it. So, if you're taking a picture of a car that's been wrapped around a tree because you need to show that mechanism of injury, get the patient out first and then take the picture. Because when the patient is not in it, that's not protected health information. That's just taking a picture or something. But when you've still got the patient in the car and you're like, man, I got to take a picture of this. That's a problem. Just work on your storytelling skills in your chart and, describe the scene.
I will tell you, as an ER doc, I just don't find pictures of scenes that useful. And I realize that I'm just going to blow everybody away with this. And they're like, oh, you're a horrible doctor. Well, yes, but I just think a much better way to do it is to trust the medic. Hey, was the car foobarred? Yeah, man, it was jacked up. Okay. To the ring of truth you go.
I know. But what do they say, though? A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So
I haven't found that. That's just me. Maybe other people are, but when the medic tells me that this car was jacked up.
Well, here's the thing, though, Dr. Jarvis. I mean, I think you're a little bit biased. You were a paramedic, for crying out loud. So when somebody tells you the story about that, excuse me, it probably rings a little bit more true to you versus the average, ED physician or a resident or med student or whatever that's trying to take your report and listen to what you're saying. So, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I also think that there is benefit to having, tasteful pictures, I guess you could call them.
I'm skeptical because basically what we're going to do is do a pan scan on them. And I think you're going to do a pan scan on them anyway.
Yeah.
So I just don't know that it's really all that helpful.
Yeah.
But again, that's just my opinion on it.
Wonder what Dr. Sani thinks. Let's ask him real quick. I agree with Mike. I think he's a great co-host. And anyway,
no, I think you're misinterpreting this.
Go blue.
What Mike is saying is
He agrees with me.
he has also evaluated the extensive scientific literature on this topic and agrees with me. Mike, you ignorant slut.
Look at Nick knows what's up.
So I think you just have to be able to tell that story. And of course, all of that's protected, right? So when the paramedic comes in and gives you a report and tells you, see what had happened was, because that's how it always starts. And they explain the whole thing to you and paint this very vivid picture. At least that's what our guys usually do when they're telling me a story about something. I feel like that's fine to do, but if they come in and see Natalie likes that, if they come in and show you a picture, I think you're right. I'm not sure that really necessarily would change anything.
Yeah. So comments are flying in. So,
I like it.
Yes,
thank you.
So Lakshmi is my medical director.
I like it.
So there we go.
I mean, or you could just ask the surgeon, geez, are we going to scan the patient? Oh, wait, don't ask questions that aren't going to make a difference on what you're going to do. Yes, you're going to pan scan. Was this dude hurt? Yes. The flat little car.
What about this though?
That is and I would agree. That's just poor behavior. And yeah, it can happen.
So I want to get up and I want to put Josie's comment up here because it seems like a no-brainer. But I know Josie and I know he knows a lot about this kind of stuff. And so he's teeing this up for us because there are clearly agencies that have not addressed. I mean, have they done their annual HIPAA training on whatever LMS online? Sure, they probably have. But have they really addressed things like photos? Have they addressed things like videos? I just got a text from somebody that's watching that has got a whole story about a call that just happened today about, a facility wanting to record the behavior of one of their patients and kind of pass that off. I mean, it's a whole longer story than that, but it's all over the place. So I feel like, you do want a policy, right?
I did think you put up the wrong Jay-Z quote, though.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Well, you want a policy if your people are following it. The worst thing for lawyers is to find that there is a policy that nobody follows. And frankly, that nobody even knows exists. So if you're going to have the policy, you have to be careful about how you do it. And you have to make sure that your folks are trained on it. So, for the big services and even for the little services, I mean, there's no shortage of, HIPAA training policies. Paige Wolfberg does excellent work in this area. Mm-hmm. They go around the nation and train on this. So there's really no excuse for not having comprehensive HIPAA policies and not having social media policies. I mean, just look at all the people getting fired these days for, making racist comments, making inappropriate comments on social media. And these aren't just, street medics. These are fire chiefs. These are, high-level administrators too. Those policies have to be equally applied to everybody. And they do need to address proper workplace behavior.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. a couple of things on here that are a lot of great comments about the interaction once they get to the hospital, right? And how pictures, for example, could sort of help. So that was Nat's. And Randy Guy says the patient may look okay on the table, but this is why we put them in the trauma system. Again, these are people that, that they're on the receiving end of the eye rolls. They're on the receiving end of the whatever. Let's just take them out, right there. And so whether that's a communication problem, not having a standardized way to hand off a patient, which my friend Tina and I worked. Well, she did all the work on it, but we're working on trying to get a standardized handoff in our county, no matter who it is you're talking to. So, I mean, it's
what
probably
I've typically found about it, Mike, is that it's an asshole issue.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's probably
being an asshole.
There's a piece to that too.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like Torben's comment on this. I only post things I would want my mother to read. Yes. And only post things that you would feel comfortable on the front page of your local paper.
Yeah.
You want that in the AJC is what we always say.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question.
That's what I call the statesman rule. Our local paper is the Austin American Statesman. So I call that the statesman rule. That and is that thing that you're about to say or email, does that feel really good to say? Yeah. Oh boy, that's going to hurt.
Yeah. Don't do it then. If you really wanted to do it, don't do it.
Yeah. So one thing that I know people are always confused about, and it seems like it goes in waves, and I relate this to CPR training, right? So we at my agency we do high performance CPR stuff at least annually, if not more, right? So, and what happens is we see a correlating survival with that training, right? So it's been a little while, the little nuances fall away. We hit it again real quick, boom, and they sort of creep up. Now it's not like dips and valleys, but the point is I think the same thing happens when people do their HIPAA training, right? They think about it for a while. They're like, oh yeah, I need to change some behaviors I've got because I just did my training. And so I'm wondering what is the deal? It's connected to this law enforcement question, but
somehow,
well, it is because I think if you're a day out of your HIPAA annual training and you're like, yeah, maybe I probably shouldn't talk about that, or I shouldn't tell you that. But if I could tell you the patient was drinking, I would tell you, but I can't. So since I can't tell you that. So there's always this weird fine line with the interaction of EMS providers and law enforcement. So I think we've kind of probably answered it in the fact that it's, they're not another medical provider, but like, how do you navigate the law enforcement dance?
Well, so to start off with, does HIPAA apply to law enforcement? And then Mikey's issue is a separate one, which is what about giving law enforcement issues or law enforcement officers information from the patient? And then the final one is this actually, I think the real guiding principle here has very little to do with HIPAA at all and has much more to do with ethics and what your role as a provider is.
So law enforcement is not a covered entity under HIPAA. So that means that, police officers can technically go around and disclose whatever they want. Now, should they? No. And I think that most people, most law enforcement agencies err on the side of not disclosing a bunch of stuff because it just looks bad if you do it. Covered entities are permitted. So this is another permissive thing, right? You may disclose information, minimum necessary, of course, but you don't have to. And generally, there's a couple of different things. So I'm looking at my notes over here.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
If you're trying to prevent someone from acting on a threat. So Jeff, your patient that came in and said, I'm going to go get my gun and shoot everybody. Do you need to call the police and tell them the patient made this specific threat? Yes, you probably do. And you can do that. You also, can alert law enforcement that somebody has died, that a victim of a crime died or that a suspect died. You can, of course, every state has mandatory reporting laws that apply to EMS. So child abuse, elder abuse.
Elder abuse, yeah.
Yep. And if you don't report that, and they find out that you knew about it, you could go to jail. So you really need to report those things. They're very serious about it, particularly here in Georgia. So those things can be reported to law enforcement. And then, of course, when they come in with a warrant or a subpoena or administrative request, you want to run that by your compliance office or by your legal counsel or by your medical records department to make sure this is a valid warrant. And then you can produce the thing that they've asked for. But when I say minimum necessary, so let's say that, the DA's office sends you a subpoena to your service and says, we need the chart for June 30th, for this patient, date of birth, and approximate time that the service was rendered. You can provide that chart if that subpoena is valid, signed by the judge and all that good stuff. But let's say you've transported that patient 12 other times. Can you then give them all the charts? Well, no, you can only give them the one that they asked for. Now, if the request is any and all charts on this patient for any day ever, of course you can provide that information.
So to answer, that's a question I had about the any and all. So we frequently get requests for charts from lawyers. Almost always it's representing someone in a car crash or something like that, and they want our chart, and that's their big question. Their request is any and all. And is there a scope to what any and all means, or any and all, does that, I do know in Texas we have some protection if there is a QI, quality improvement stuff, that has some protection, so we don't have to provide that. But are there any other limitations?
I know the answer to that.
Oh, good.
It depends.
It depends. That is in fact true.
See, Mike listens.
So one of the things that we look for, and I say our medical records vendor looks for, is whether or not mental health and substance abuse things are in those particular records. Because if they have not been specifically requested and the patient has not had an opportunity to object to that production, they redact it out. And that includes out of EMS reports. You end up producing them usually under some agreed upon protective order that says this information is confidential. It's not going to be filed in public records with the court, that kind of stuff. And you produce it confidentially or under seal or however the court wants you to do it. But they generally don't just produce it in response to a request, for a chart, because what you're really looking for, of course, is, the circumstances of the accident. You're not necessarily looking for that time that they were committed to a psychiatric hospital. There's a heightened protection for mental health and substance abuse and HIV.
Yeah. Well, there should be, it seems like.
Yeah, there should be. Yeah.
Well, and the other argument that I have with releasing information, and Nick has a great comment here. Well, the patient responded positively to naloxone. So the issue is I have an ethical issue with this, because what you're really saying is, listen, this dude you're making a value judgment about him, and you're confusing your role as a healthcare provider with that of a law enforcement officer. My job is not to enforce the laws. My job is to take care of this patient, and I have an obligation to take care of the patient. So I think that we get into a little bit of ethical trouble by doing this, and I'm pretty happy that there is some protection. There's some laws that say for other reasons, don't do that. Yeah. So I kind of like that.
So then how would you navigate that call then, Dr. Jarvis, right? So we'll use the opiate, right? So yeah. It's an illegal act. I don't know, whatever. I'm trying to think of a scenario off the top of my head.
I probably engaged in an illegal act on my way to work. I, exceeded the speed limit.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess the cops want to know, was there a crime committed, right? And if the crime was an overdose on heroin, excuse me, allergies. We still haven't even talked about my COVID test.
I was going to say it's the Rona.
Yeah, we have to get to that.
Yeah.
You got a little CSF leak right there.
Yeah, no, it's still leaking out of my ears. I agree. But So can you tell them? Like, can you tell them legally? Yes. It appears that, as Nick said, this patient has responded positively to naloxone. Like, are you crossing the line with giving them PHI, or like, I mean, how does that work? It seems like it could get dirty.
My feeling is you don't give out that information. What you say is you have to send a request to my legal department. And that's part of the reason that I know all of the GBI agents in our area by first name and have them all on our cell phone right now, because they're always calling me to get charts or interview crews, because the crews say to them, no, I can't tell you anything without talking to the lawyer. So
well trained. Good answer.
Yeah, they're very well trained. It's wonderful. But it also, it takes that burden off of them as providers then to feel like they have to give information. I love my cop friends, but we know that law enforcement can be coercive sometimes. And as you said, you're there taking care of the patient. You're not making judgments about whether a crime occurred. You don't know. And you don't want to be the one giving out information inappropriately. But if they go through the proper channels, they can get it.
Yeah. Here's one right here.
Oh, yeah.
Every damn day this is going on, right? They ask you if you smell intoxicating liquor, or have they been drinking, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's
here's the great thing.
What do you tell them? I can't tell you. You need to go talk to a lawyer. Like, that's just weird, because then you're getting into this weird interpersonal, relational. Hey, bro, what's up? I don't know.
Well, I mean, paramedics can decide if somebody's legally intoxicated, right? You just know that.
It's not a lab test.
The patient was drunk. Like, you can absolutely definitively put that in your PCR, right? No. The answer is no. That's what's been told to me is no.
Well, so I will tell you, though, intoxication is not a lab value. Intoxication is a clinical determination. Now, whether paramedics should be doing that or not, I think is a different question. But intoxication is not a lab value. And so we run into this with our psych hospitals all the time, who don't want to take a patient until they get a blood alcohol level of something. And the dude, if he gets to a legal blood alcohol level that he's not intoxicated, he's going to go into withdrawals. He lives at an intoxicated level according to that number.
Yeah.
Clinically, he's not intoxicated.
Yeah. And so you don't know. Now, can you tell law enforcement, you're coming out of the building with your patient and they ask you, did you see any needles on the ground? I think you tell them, go in and look at your crime scene. I can't, I'm not going to discuss
plenty of them there.
Yeah. Go look. And so I think you just don't give out that information, because you're not law enforcement, you're providers.
I think you just there's a role confusion issue there, and it can get problematic.
Yeah.
And did the car smell like alcohol? You know what? I get the COVID has taken out my senses. I don't think it's a good idea.
I can't smell anything through this N95. I don't know.
I guess it gets a lot easier nowadays when.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Was doing all that stuff. All right. So let me, excuse me.
So Mike, you need to talk about your COVID test since we're talking about that right now.
We'll definitely talk. Let's come back to it. I just want to make sure we got all of our stuff. We kind of hit on getting
a lot of two beers comments.
Oh yeah, a lot of two
beers.
Two
the
beers.
Only time I see some skepticism about people actually having two beers. There is an occasion where they can have two beers. And that's if they were reading the Bible on their front porch while minding their own business. Then they can have two beers. But only if they're assaulted by two dudes.
No, I don't even know if I'm okay with that.
You don't think?
I don't think so.
Maybe that's a Houston thing.
Yeah, Houston's got the COVID. We'll come back to that. So I just want to circle back with, speaking of pandemic and stuff. Did we feel good about talking about how does the pandemic affect HIPAA? I mean, we talked about FaceTime, but are there other issues? Like, here's a question for you, and this is one that was DM'd to us on Twitter. Thank you very much for doing that. But it was like, what about employees reporting to work, writing down their temperature and how they're feeling and all that kind of stuff? Is that PHI? Is the employer responsible for guarding that information as if it's just sitting out on the counter somewhere? What's that about? Is there
That's a
anything
great
like that?
question. Thank you.
Well, here's the interesting thing. That is not a HIPAA question. It's an ADA question. It's an Americans with Disabilities Act question. So that law, which of course applies to employers that have more than 15 employees, says that you have to keep your employees' medical information confidential. That means you don't store it in your employee files, you store it separately. But you can also do things like test your employees during a pandemic. When I walk into work, one, I'm required to wear a mask and I wear it. I also get my temperature checked when I walk in.
You clearly hate freedom.
I do. I really, wearing a mask is just the worst thing ever.
Just stop.
Nobody hates freedom more than lawyers.
I am first one, wearing my mask. I'm excited to wear it.
I should have been too, turns out.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that it's actually not a HIPAA thing. So am I frozen?
Yeah, you're frozen. I pulled you out to see if maybe this did anything. So give me a second here and I'll get. You still look frozen on my end.
Was that the BeLive version of a Control-Alt-Delete, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. Let's see if this.
So just to help stall a little bit, because I think this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
We were able to mandate that every one of our paramedics undergo COVID testing, so PCR. And our HR said, "Yep, absolutely, you can sign off on that."
Yeah.
We could not mandate that, and I didn't want to, but we could not mandate that they have an antibody test because that wouldn't really tell it. We couldn't do anything about that. And then we can require that we record temperatures. But HR said we had to do, I don't remember what it was, but we had to do something special with that data because it was, I guess, part of the employee record or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I know Sam was able to log back on, but.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say your camera is still blank on our end. All right. That's good. That's a good little.
Do we have audio?
Yeah, we've got audio. We've just got. Oh yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Well, hopefully, because of the three of us, the one who actually knows the answers to these questions is not here.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we got your audio. Just what for some reason your camera
doesn't seem to want to work anymore. Okay, well.
Which was such a bummer.
Are you using an internal or
no?
An external
this is an external one.
So you may need to select your camera.
I did. It's okay. It just doesn't want to.
That's the extent of my troubleshooting.
Oh, something just happened. Hold on.
Okay, wait. Let's try it again.
Because it's black screen now instead of gray screen. So that's a little bit of a maneuver. And so that ain't working. I don't know.
No, it's not working. Oh well.
On my end.
All right. No. Well, as long as the audio's on. It's okay.
Yeah, audio's on. You're good.
Okay. Well, maybe it'll come back in a minute.
We'll keep on. Yeah. I mean, you're in here. So if it does happen to pop back on, then it'll just pop back on. Otherwise, we'll just listen to you.
So let's, there was actually Steve Smith just had a great question about police officers. And I think this is a slightly different take on this, Sam. So his question is, you're on a call with police officers and you determine that the patient has symptoms consistent with COVID. And let's say we find out that what their test results are, can we share that information with the police?
So yes, there are some relaxation of the disclosure rules when it comes to public health purposes.
Hmm.
So if if somebody's been exposed, I mean, of course, now the hospitals can report that to the responding agencies under Ryan White. It's been added to that list of diseases that they can disclose. You as the agency may not want to be the one disclosing it. You may disclose it to the public health authority that will then disclose it to law enforcement. So it's really a question of, is your agency the right one to make that disclosure?
Well, I guess I really am lucky here because I have been doing that, but I'm also the one getting call at 3 a.m. by our local police officers asking about what's an exposure, what's not. And they do that because I've given my phone number out and asked them to. But it turns out I'm one of our local health authorities, so I guess maybe I'm covered that way.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, golly. Does anyone else have anything that's watching? If you got any other questions or thoughts, throw it in the chat there. We'd be happy to get to that. If you're listening to this as a podcast, which this whole sentence will not make sense to you, but if you are listening to this on podcast, you can find us all on Twitter. In fact, if you just go back a little bit, you will find the post that we put out with Sam's Twitter, Dr. Jarvis's, mine, all that stuff. You can reach out and just ask any questions. I think that would be cool. So here's another question that Steve's got. So if we're a hospital based, should the hospital give that information or go to CDC?
So basically, should it go from the hospital or should it go through the public health authority?
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming he's getting at. Sorry.
Yeah.
Talking about the test results?
Yeah, test results, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So again, certain information can be given out under the Ryan White Act. So if you have a designated infection control officer, they're the one who's supposed to be getting the information and then disclosing it to the officers who might have been involved. So even for police departments, they're supposed to have a DICO who's getting that information and passing it along. And again, the point being to limit the disclosure, to limit the number of folks that are getting this information. So you want it to go through one person.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, Nick said that we're having trouble with long-term care facilities. They're not disclosing patient info to us as first responders. And yeah, totally. I mean, that's across the board. And again, just another misunderstanding or misinterpretation of what they're allowed to tell us and what they're not. It's just
right.
It's a pretty major issue. I don't know how you fix that. Like, because everybody has to do training. So clearly the training isn't the answer. Maybe it's not the right kind of training. I don't know.
Yeah. And, nursing homes, I think, are under some pressures now because they know that there's going to be a lot of litigation coming about their infection control procedures. They're having to report their numbers, so maybe they don't really want to tell people what's going on in their facility. Now, you could just clean your facility really well and take care of patients that have things and not have those problems. But of course, we know that that's not always the case for nursing homes. So there may be some other things at work of why they don't disclose that information, but they're actually supposed to.
Yeah.
Again, that's a treatment thing. If you have a suspected COVID patient and you've called EMS for that, you really need to tell them what's going on. And it shouldn't just be, well, he's been down 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the old, I just came on shift. I don't really know.
It's not my patient.
Yeah.
My patient.
I don't normally work this area, so I don't know anything about this person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's problematic. They're supposed to have gotten a handoff, right? They're supposed to know.
Yep. Yep.
So that is one of the ways where I think it's really helpful if your medical director has an appointment to the health district.
Yes.
So we dealt with this, the long-term, so COVID in Texas, and it may be a federal issue, is a mandatory reporting.
Yeah.
So it must immediately be reported as soon as it's being interpreted, as soon as the results are in. But I believe it actually says as soon as you suspect. The truth is there's so damn many of them, nobody can keep up with it anyway. but the health district gets that, and they then turn that around to us, and we put it in proximity alerts in our CAD. But we're able to do that because we're sort of part of the health district also. Hey, welcome back.
I switched to not my external camera, so
nice.
Color's not as good, but hey.
That's good. At least we got you back. That's good.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you find the nursing homes, not disclosing this information. They should. And I think that's something that, the agency's medical director should be talking to the facility's medical director and saying, look, we have to have this information and you're supposed to be disclosing it.
This is a life safety issue, guys.
Yeah.
I hate to say it. When you mention this is just, I guess, my naivete, but you said maybe the nursing homes are really worried they see this avalanche of lawsuit. That is the absolute first time I even thought about that. I had never had that thought. And as soon as you said it, I'm like, holy shit. Yeah, I'll bet they are. Yeah. I can see that happening.
A lot of them are very worried about it because, traditionally infection control has not been good, that kind of thing. They feel that people are going to blame them for the outbreaks.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
You're suicide by social media, so I'm not going to comment on that. But
Lauren had an interesting question. And as she said, I think it's more of an HR question. But it is an interesting one. And I think almost all of us are going to have to deal with this. An employee gets the COVID cooties and they have to miss work. And they say, well, I'm an ER doctor, I'm a paramedic, I'm a nurse, I got it from my patients, therefore this should be an on-the-job injury. And they say, no, there is a prevalence of 10% in the community, therefore you're more likely to have gotten it from the community because we have a rule that says you have to wear PPE. And if you were following our rule, therefore you never would have gotten it.
So this is another it depends answer. It depends on what your state law says about workers' comp protections for COVID. Mm-hmm. So a bunch of states now are starting to say that if you're a healthcare worker or a first responder, the presumption is that you got it at work, but that's not everywhere. It also may depend on your particular workers' comp insurer, whether they're willing to say that. So some insurance companies have figured out that they don't want to fight a bunch of bad faith suits later on. So they're just going to cover some of these things. And, next year when you renew your insurance, there's going to be a COVID exclusion on it. But for right now, rather than be seen as cruel and heartless for denying coverage to folks, they're going to try not to do that.
Yeah, there are so many domino effect things that we're going to see over the next, who knows how long, right? Like this is a perfect example of one of those things. I mean, the nursing homes, what happens if they all go out of business? There's nowhere to put people. I'm just thinking there's a million disasters waiting.
Yeah.
And let's face it, they don't run with a huge profit margin. They are going to get out of business. They don't have much room to go.
Yeah.
It's sad, but that's true.
Yeah.
Nick has another good question here. So I don't have to worry about HIPAA because I don't bill.
Well, that's another, it depends. So for those of y'all who don't know, Nick is my speaking partner for the past 2 years. So I know a lot about his county-based service.
He's been lobbing those balls.
He's been lobbing these softballs to me.
So good.
And if, particularly county agencies, if you provide health insurance for your employees, you may be considered a health plan and may be covered under HIPAA for those sorts of things. So even if you don't think you're covered by HIPAA, you might be covered by HIPAA. The other thing to remember is that it's not just HIPAA that governs privacy. There's, I love that response. There's state laws that govern patient privacy as well. And so, you may get in trouble for inappropriate disclosure of private information as a state tort claim that has nothing to do with HIPAA, but has to do with state laws as far as, personal information protection.
So that's interesting because maybe there's more to that question than I was aware of. I didn't realize your obligations under HIPAA had anything to do with whether you billed or not.
So for the most part, it's tied to providers that bill electronically. So if you bill Medicare or Medicaid, or any commercial provider electronically, which everybody does, you're covered. If you, and it used to be that, we sort of waited till everybody got on board with the electronic billing, but now everyone does that. Nobody sends a paper bill anymore. I don't think they pay them if you do.
I think there's still probably quite a few. I know in Oregon we still have, we're trying to modernize them from a state perspective, but yeah, absolutely.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I thought that was all.
One thing though, is if you're a department and you do not bill at all anybody for anything, does that mean that you're not covered by HIPAA?
Then potentially no.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, but at the same time, like I said, there's other laws that may cover the privacy aspects. So
yeah,
probably when it comes to patient care providers, especially the EMS agencies or fire agencies that provide medical care, you kind of want to assume that you're covered by it, especially for the privacy aspect of it.
And because, it's sort of the right thing to do.
The right thing to do. Yeah. But that's an interesting piece that comes up about disclosure of information. So, for example, Grady EMS responds to a lot of scenes with Atlanta Fire, because that's our fire response agency. If Atlanta Fire does not provide patient care, they just show up, but they don't actually provide care. We really don't provide patient information to them. So, we might provide demographic information, like this is the name of the guy whose house you showed up at, because they need that for their fire report. But if they didn't render patient care, we're not going to give them information about the patient's condition.
Sure.
Now,
which they probably are perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And if they did, though, if their paramedic wrote in the back or something, then yes, we might share information. And in fact, we do jointly QA some of the calls with them to make sure that, your community response is working properly.
Well, it's been a fascinating talk.
Yeah.
There's still people with us. This is great.
I know. Yeah.
People are
My
staying
brain
up
is
late tonight.
Well, I had no idea HIPAA was tied to billing. That is just
See,
you learned something new tonight.
That's good.
You did. You really did illuminate the darkness of my HIPAA brain with the bright light. That was outstanding.
It's really good. For those of you that are still watching, type in the chat what time zone are you in? I'm just curious. We tend to
26 folks.
We tend to start things Pacific Coast time. That's me in Oregon.
Yeah, it is in your Pacific Coast bias.
Well, or Pacific
Sam,
time.
Where is Atlanta? I mean, I know where it is.
In Georgia, Eastern Standard.
It's
Eastern Standard.
Yeah,
well, I did get the where part, but I on the clock face.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, so we're 11 o'clock here.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It's long.
Yeah, way to go. Quite the sport. Strong work.
We've got some Eastern, a couple Easterns, a mountain. That's good. So so let's talk about the situation for a minute, the COVID.
Oh my Lord. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before you hit the I think Nick has an outstanding question here, and it's probably not a good one for tonight. But oh boy, did he tee that up. That is capacity.
That's because you gotta bring him on for this. You gotta have us both on for that one. We do a great presentation on that. I'll just brag on us for a little bit. But that is one that we talk about. We have a refusals presentation that we've done at a bunch of conferences, and everybody seems to really like it. So you bring him in. We'll do that one for you guys.
Good.
Yeah,
I like that.
We'd love to.
It.
I like that. So this will be our last Facebook Live. No, how do I say this? So this will be our last Facebook exclusive live. We have a new streaming software that we will be starting on our next live, which is yet to be scheduled. But you'll be able to watch us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch. If you're on Twitch, Flightbird Jed's got a page over there, so you can go check that out. We'll be live streaming to all those simultaneously. So if you're not generally a Facebook person, you don't got to watch it. You can just do it right on Twitter or YouTube, whatever you want to do. So we're really excited about that. I almost used it tonight, but it's a little bit more complex, and it takes and I don't have enough reps to be able to sort of produce the show and sort of interact at the same time. So I didn't want to. We had such a great guest. I didn't want to screw it up.
Well, she is a great guest, but I think the real reason is that you wanted to debut it with Lighthouse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Let's see what Ritu thinks about that. Let's see.
Well, if Ritu was all that concerned, he would have been on the pod tonight.
Let's see. Oh no,
he likes that idea. No, that's a good idea.
Yeah. See, it's a good idea. So let's talk about COVID. All right. So so here's the thing. So I got a little complacent with wearing my face covering and was exposed.
Because freedom.
No, because I had my pin in my pocket, and when I arrived at the location, I grabbed my mask, my face covering, threw it right on here, and I had nowhere else I was going or I had been. So I specifically grabbed it to go into this location. But what I didn't do was put it on because I got a little cozy, right? You get a little cozy, you're shooting shit, whatever happens.
It's easy.
And the next morning, boom, exposed. So I was hanging around this person for, I don't know, like an hour and a half, whatever. And so I had to self-isolate. I was hanging out by myself for about 3 days because I didn't want to go get tested. Thank you, Dr. Jeff Jarvis, Dr. Ritu Sani, providing amazing support and clinical guidance for me. Well, it's like, go get tested or not. Anyway, but yeah, so I got to experience the cerebral spinal fluid tap, which is the nasal pharyngeal swab. And let me tell you, not good times. It is not good times. Now, if you're watching right now and you're still hanging in there, and if you've had one of these, you know what's up. But it is not fun. So
suckage.
Wear your damn face coverings. Don't get lazy. Don't get lazy because I paid for it. My family paid for it. Like it was a stupid. And I'm embarrassed that happened to me. Because you don't want the swab. And you don't want the swab. No. Here's the other thing. I had my GoPro on when I got it. And so I have the whole thing on.
Of course you did. Did you have your drone hovering over you too?
No, I didn't. I did not have the drone, but I did have the GoPro looking right through the steering wheel, right at me. And it seemed a lot bigger, the thing they were using, than it really was. It's only like this long. It was a special plastic thingy with it wasn't like a Q-tip thingy. It had spikes on the end of it. It looked terrible, and it was right in. Mm-hmm. It came out negative.
I can tell you, Carl Kiefer, one of our paramedics. Carl is the one who sampled my CSF. It was pleasant.
Not good.
So I will tell you that at least CDC is putting out some information that you can probably do oral swabbing or nasal swabbing. They probably work just as well as nasopharyngeal.
Yeah, there was I just saw and I should have shared the link, but there was a company that had developed a breath test. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, so I posted that on my Twitter.
Yeah, maybe that's probably where I saw it.
It's an Israeli company that apparently has it's essentially a COVID breathalyzer. It gives results in 10 minutes.
Yep.
So if you wanted
90% accurate.
Yeah. So if you wanted to go to that party, you could make sure everyone gets tested.
Yeah.
And then go to that party and have a good time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical.
No, you should read it. They describe the science, and it's all about micron size and sound and like the the hertz that this thing emits. Everything's got a sound or a signal, and they talk about how they've isolated that, and they can find it 90% of the time. It's fascinating.
Yeah. No, the main thing I'm skeptical about is the go to a party thing. Yeah. So even the PCR, or a viral culture, that is going to be negative for up to 3 days. So there's just a inoculation period. I mean, it's got to replicate enough to be detectable. And that's the problem with this. You can actually be shedding that shit before you can detect it. And certainly before you have symptoms. And that's a challenge. And that's the reason we need to wear the damn mask.
Yeah.
It's not for us. It's for everybody else around us.
Freedom, baby.
I don't want to kill grandma.
And I did not wear my mask because I was being contrite.
No, I no.
Yeah.
So Mike,
No,
it wasn't-
I know you weren't.
every time I'm saying freedom, it's because of my frustrations as a Texan.
Yeah, no, yeah. You guys are not looking good there.
It is. You mentioned when we were talking about what the consequences for at the street level for violations was. So our governor has managed to back himself into a corner. Initially, when he was still all on board with the open everything up, we have beat this. He said we had not governors, but mayors who said, oh, no, we're worried about it.
Yeah.
We want to enforce mask rules. We want to keep people locked down. He said, you can't do that. And as a matter of fact, he removed the ability. He issued an executive order that says you cannot fine anyone or put them in jail for this. So essentially, there are no consequences to disobeying these rules.
Except the
Well,
giving
now-
COVID part.
Yeah, now he's like, uh-oh, we probably ought to like enforce mask use. And now mayors are like,
Yeah.
no,
There's-
what are you going to do?
There's
So what?
There's some of that starting to come up here in Oregon too, where they cannot enforce the fact that anyway, it's a whole thing. Whatever.
Oh.
I choose to wear a mask a
Mhm.
lot more often now, by the way.
Yeah.
But I did order me some sweet Oregon duck face coverings that'll have my O on it. It's gonna be really
Nice.
good. Got me a nice navy blue one to match my uniform, so I'm squared away. Don't
So I
be an
think-
idiot.
And most
I think you
importantly,
have to
though,
treat
your
it like
test
a-
was-
Fashion accessory.
That's what I'm talking
Um,
about. What'd you say, Jeff?
your test results. So you got your nose tickled.
Yeah, I said
Yeah.
negative.
Oh, did you? All right.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was
I
a
didn't
good day. Oh, this is good.
Ouch. Yeah. The only good news is we still got Florida, baby.
Yeah, Florida's wow. That's a real competition with you guys now, Jeff.
I would actually say that our governor, he may be doing boneheaded things, but I don't actually think he's stupid.
Yeah.
Thank you, Florida.
Yeah. It's well, ours isn't too far behind. Although he is not mandating masks for the state, he has been now going on a tour of the state while wearing his and encouraging
Good.
everyone to wear it.
Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, I'm glad he's coming along with that.
We call this modeling.
Yes, it's important.
So
And if he
model
does it, people
good
will do
behavior.
it. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
All right, we've been going for 100 minutes, so I'm going to close us out.
Okay.
I mean, that's good. That's typical.
Yeah,
not bad.
that's great.
That's not mad. So, Sam, thank you so much for jumping on with us.
Mike,
Absolutely,
Thank you.
Sam. This was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Awesome. We appreciate it. And Dr. Jarvis, thanks for pinch hitting.
Yes,
for
thank
that,
you.
for that tool that forgot he covered somebody's shift.
It was great. I get to meet Sam.
Yeah.
This was wonderful. I get to talk to my buddy, and I get to talk to all my friends on Facebook.
Exactly.
This is a wonderful thing.
Exactly. It's been great. All right. So on behalf of our guest, Mike Verkest, you've been watching and listening to a Second Shift podcast, a proud member of the Flightbridge Ed Podcast Network and a Fire Dog production. We will see you on the next one. Thanks, you guys. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.